Welcome back, everyone. Let's jump right into this explainer. Today, we're tackling something absolutely crucial for your legal studies, the Juristic Foundations of Interpretation. We're going to take all that abstract legal theory and bridge the gap to actual practical courtroom application. This is perfectly tailored to get you ready for your CIA1 assessment, so let's get into it.
We've got a really clear roadmap for today. We're looking at the necessity of interpretation, diving into the literal versus logical debate, exploring the legacy of Justice Cardozo, bridging that practical gap with some real case law, and then wrapping up with next steps.
All right, part one, the necessity of interpretation.
So here's the reality check. Drafting a totally flawless piece of legislation that magically anticipates every future scenario, it's literally impossible. Draftsmen just aren't clairvoyant. That's why the legendary Lord Denning said judges have to step in and iron out the creases. They're bridge builders. Justice Benjamin Cardozo hit the nail on the head too. When a statute has an inevitable gap, the judge has to fill it in. They are the essential safety net for imperfect language.
Legal scholar Michael Zander actually breaks down exactly why these gaps happen, pointing out three main culprits. First, complexity. You've got multiple draftsmen trying to mix technical and legal jargon, which just naturally breeds vagueness. Second, indeterminate terms. Lawmakers actually use words like reasonable on purpose so judges can figure out the context later. And third, imprecise language. Words have multiple meanings by nature, and you know litigants are going to twist those words to fit their own arguments.
Just look at how wild this gets in practice. In Tej Kiran Jain versus Sanjeeva Reddy, the court looked at Article 105(2), which grants parliamentary immunity for anything said. But does anything literally mean anything, even defamation? The court had to untangle this, eventually deciding that, yeah, anything does indeed mean everything said during parliamentary business. It's the perfect showcase of why judicial interpretation isn't just helpful, it's absolutely necessary.
Which brings us to part two, literal versus logical interpretation.
These are the two heavyweight contenders courts use to fix those language issues. On one side, you've got literal interpretation. This is the strict black-letter rule. You read the text, you give the words their natural, grammatical meaning, and that's it, even if the result is kind of harsh. On the other side, we have logical interpretation. This is the purposeful rule. Judges only pull this out when the literal meaning is super ambiguous, inconsistent, or just leads to total absurdity. It's all about Cardozo's ideas of uniformity and analysis.
These aren't just abstract ideas either. These contrasting approaches dictate the outcomes of high-stakes commercial and tax disputes. Let's look at how courts apply them using a couple of foundational cases.
First, the Ramavatar Buddha Prasad case from 1961. The core question was financially massive. Are betel leaves exempted from sales tax as vegetables? The court went literal. They looked at the everyday commercial meaning and said, nope, because honestly, who goes to the market and asks for betel leaves to make a vegetable stew for dinner? The practical, everyday meaning totally overrode strict botany here.
Now flip that and look at State of West Bengal versus Washi Ahmed in 1977. Does green ginger count as a vegetable for tax exemption? This time the court said yes. They didn't just grab a dictionary, they looked at the popular context. Since it's grown in a kitchen garden and used to flavor daily meals, it counts. It's a great example of a court shifting to a more logical, contextual reading.
All right, moving into part three, the legacy of Cardozo.
To really get Cardozo, you have to grasp interstitial legislation. Think about it. Legislatures only meet periodically, but the justice system has to run every single day. Because of that, judges have to operate in the interstices, the microscopic spaces or gaps of the law. They legislate interstitially, filling in those gaps left behind by lawmakers to keep the whole system running smoothly.
So how far can a judge go when filling a gap? Check out R. v. Allen. This is a classic bigamy case, marrying someone when you're already married. The defendant tried to pull a fast one using a hyperliteral interpretation. He argued that because his first marriage was still valid, his second marriage was technically legally void from the start. So, in his eyes, he never legally married a second time, meaning he couldn't be charged with bigamy.
Right, if the court bought that literal logic, the law against bigamy would literally be impossible to break. It's a total circular absurdity. So, the court stepped in, filled the gap, and logically interpreted marrying a second time as just going through the ceremony of marriage, regardless of whether it's legally valid. They saved the law from becoming a total joke.
But, and this is a big but, this brings us to Cardozo's ultimate warning. He said, "Judges are not knight-errants, roaming at will." Basically, They can't just go rogue. Yes, they fill gaps. Yes, they fix absurdities. But they absolutely cannot just rewrite laws however they please to fit their own personal morals. They're always tethered to the spirit of the statute.
And that flows perfectly right into Part 4, bridging the practical gap.
How do courts balance the text and the spirit in a society that's constantly changing? Let's look at M.V. Joshi versus M.U. Shimpey from 1961. The law banned adulterated butter. The defendant tried to argue the technical definition meant only butter made directly from milk, not butter made from curd.
If the court agreed with him, they'd have created a massive loophole. Excluding curd butter would have made the law totally useless, especially in rural areas where it was standard. So the court used a logical interpretation to promote the actual object of the act, which was preventing food adulteration. They made sure the law didn't turn into a dead letter, a rule that exists on paper but does absolutely nothing in the real world.
These 4 cases are pure gold for your CIA 1 prep. They perfectly map out how courts bridge the gap. We just saw M.V. Joshi, but look at State of Maharashtra v. Dr. Prafulla Desai. The court used evolutionary interpretation to upgrade the word presence to include modern video conferencing. In Unnikrishnan, they used logical conjunction, reading Article 21 and 41 together to logically say the right to life must include the right to education. And in Lalita Kumari, logic dictated that the word shall regarding police recording information has to be mandatory to protect fundamental rights.
Wow, we've covered a ton of ground. Let's head into Part 5, summary and next steps.
When you're reviewing this for your exam, here are the core principles you've got to remember. Interpretation is the science of finding meaning in the text, but it's also the art of reaching the true spirit of the law when those words fail. Whenever a judge applies logic, they have to balance it with social welfare. At the end of the day, the overarching goal is to make sure our laws stay living, breathing, and fundamentally just.
Your main mission as a student analyzing these juristic foundations is to master this exact tension. It's a constant living balancing act between what the black-letter text actually says and what the law is practically trying to achieve out there in society.
To really lock this in for your assessment, I want to leave you with a massive question. We've seen the literal and logical rules in action. But what on earth do courts do when the literal rule causes a gross injustice and the basic logical rule just isn't strong enough to fix it? Chew on that, because it sets up our next explainer perfectly, where we're going to uncover the power of the mischief rule and the golden rule. Keep studying, and I'll catch you in the next one.